What is going on, boys and girls of YouTube? We're back at it. We have a mid lane tier list. There's been a lot going on in Smite. Put out a big patch. They added Vulcan, who is awesome, by the way. They also added some hunter buffs and a new starter for hunters, which is OP. So hunters right now are just more valuable than everyone else in the game. Straight up, like the hunter characters beat everything right now. I have updated Smite Source with the build, so it's there. I also updated Smite Source with an anti-hunter build for supports. It is purely for you to run and stand in front of hunters. So try it out. Let me know how it works for you if you're dealing with that. And then this tier list, I'm going to mention where I'm placing gods for the time being, because I'm recording this on the 27th. I'm hoping they nerf or remove that item, and where they would be if hunters weren't as broken right now. So basically, if hunters get nerfed, you'll know who to play. So we'll talk about it. I'll probably try to place hunters after all the mages, so you really know kind of like the truth about the role and what to do. Hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed, and let's get into this, boys and girls. I've pulled all of the characters I think you should potentially think about playing mid currently, right? They're already here. You know, it goes all the way over to under my camera. You can't see those. Mid lane tier list. Super simple. Right now, there are not that many very high tier mid mages. All right. So let's just start talking about it. Agni is probably your third best mage right now, just purely from the mage standpoint. Hunter's not included, right? So if we're just looking at mages in the mid lane, probably your third best. Agni's problem is his early game is not good. His mid game is very average. You can, I get comments every day like, is Agni's nerfed? Is he bad? Is this and that? I don't do damage. Basically, you spike when you have 5 to 6 items, which is, 25 to 30 minutes, depending on how your game's going. But at that point, he does do more than a lot of the other mages. He also has a ton of control, which is very valuable. So while his mid game is weaker damage-wise, having that control, if you're playing in a team setting, can be very valuable. That's why he maintains that A tier slot. Aladdin. Oddly enough, I'd probably put Aladdin right now in that A tier. If your jungle is not playing him, play him mid. If your jungle wants to play him, let the jungle play him. He will do better in jungle. He will have more pressure, more control. But in the mid lane, he can safely clear with his one. He can rotate and be part of fights. He basically plays a second jungler. Your jungle clear is quick still, so you're able to just counter farm if you decide to. Aladdin just needs more nerfs, at least until Wheelix is put in the game, because she has been, they told us she's coming out eventually here in the next 2 months. That will counter Aladdin. That will change things. But we're 2 months out, right? Honor's kind of weak. I wouldn't say he's a bad mid hunter. I would say you're really playing it when you're forced into that role. You have too much magic on your team. Your ADC didn't play a hunter. Other hunters are picks and bans. He's way down there. Play with his his aspect if you do decide to play him, but probably don't play him in the first place. Anubis, I think Anubis is terrible. I think there's nothing good about Anubis right now. Anubis can't shred tanks the same way he did in Smite 1. He can't do as much damage as he did in Smite 1. He is not as scary as he was in Smite 1. And in Smite 1, for 10 years, he really didn't get played. He finally started to get played at the end, right before Smite 2 came out, but too little too late, right? So, with Anubis, your 1, 2, 3 clear is great, because you full clear the wave with your 1. But the second you start being pressured, the jungler starts diving you, the supports show up, the soulback plucks you, you start dying on cooldown. And it's just not a fun time. So I would not recommend playing Anubis outside of for fun. He's not good. Aphrodite, very mid tier. I'd rather have Afro support, or maybe even like solo, because you want him to come out tanky. You do decent damage with Afro mid, but you still die quickly. And with anti-heal being so good and easily attainable, you end up having to build into Rod of Asclepius, which removes anti-heal for 3 seconds, and you become kind of like, you want to heal, but you also need to do the damage. It's definitely not a bad mage by any means. You will have some bad matchups. You'll get poked out a lot by gods like Vulcan and Agni, maybe even Akate, which are oddly enough the top 3 mages. But you can get away with it. You just got to get the late game linked to a carry, linked to your hunter, and you'll probably win the game, because you just babysit your hunter. Any jungler dives on you, you kiss him, you kill him, right? Definitely not a bad pick. It's just another god that plays for heavy late game and really has little early mid game control. Baron, I feel like he's kind of a sleeper mid. He doesn't get played much right now. His damage is there. His control is there. He's a little bit safer than some of these other mages because of his ult, basically allowing him to get, take less damage and get out of jail free, get the movement from the 2. You have self peel with your 3. He's solid. He's just not great. His damage isn't insane. He is still a riskier pick. He doesn't have high mobility. Once you get into team fights, he's going to be dove. You got to have a good early mid game, which he can do. You just got to play him right and try not to die. CERN. I'd probably put CERN down here in the C tier. No aspect CERN, by the way. You got to be ranged or you're going to struggle. Your clear is not that great. The thing is, with the new Hunter starter item, both Anhur and CERN are probably B tier with the starter item and with crit being so strong. You could run it in mid every game. So like I said, I'm going to mention where they are in reality versus current state of crit. Both of these would probably be above these 2 gods in a B tier, almost A tier, because crit's just literally, if it's not one of the top 3 mages or Aladdin, I'd probably play a Hunter in mid every game if I'm just trying to win, like literally every game. Chalk did really well at Lamb, mainly because of his engage. He literally went full strength build and just full engage Heartseeker OP, right? Your issue with that in ranked play is it's much harder to get these 3 and 4 man ultimates on Chalk because people do not play super grouped and as a team as often in mid to lower ranked. So that value for Chalk does drop. In a higher level ranked, I'd probably say A tier. Anything below that, I'd probably say B tier. He'll be consistent. You'll be able to get your 1 or 2 kills. You do die very quickly late game. You are playing with the aspect on Chalk in the mid lane. I'd say if you really enjoy that melee style, but you want to be mid, that's the god you play. Like 100% play Chalk. Solid all around god. Cupid, right here with the other hunters. Same boat. Cupid's all right in mid. Your clear would be pretty bad. Your presence would be mad, but with the crit meta, it's 10x that. So it's a hunter. Same with Danza. All the hunters so far falling under that kind of category. You shouldn't really be playing them in mid outside the fact that they're OP. Hades, I actually like Hades mid. When you play him on a solo, you play him full damage. You do need to have the right team comps to make this work. He will not work with every team comp. However, that doesn't mean the other team is going to play correctly around you either. And in ranked, you're going to be able to get away with it regardless of team comp most of the time. So B tier is where I place Hades. Your control is really good. Your damage output is good. You're building full damage. You're getting that poly. You're playing on your procs. Your mid lane is fairly safe because you can clear. And if they go on you, you just dash away, alt, dash away. like if you really don't want to down Hades, you shouldn't die. Akate is still the best mage in my opinion. Her damage output is ridiculous. Her ult is probably the best teamfight ult in Smite right now. Her lane presence is good. She's safe because of her ult. She can use it for mobility as long as you're getting off in time. Aegis buys you a lot of time to get away with getting your ult off. She's got ridiculous damage output. She's great around objectives. She's great in team fights that are extended because you keep that 2 in there. You get a bunch of bonus damage. She is very, very good. She just got some nerfs too. She's still great. You also have to play around her passive. If you don't know her passive yet, take a second to read it, pay attention to it in the game. It does increase your damage output a lot when you're using it correctly. Izanami, I'd put Izanami regardless of crit down here with Anubis. I just think she's bad. Her ult is way better than Smite 1, but her kit is weak. She gets worked by all the other hunters. She needs an aspect that does help her a lot. All right, Jingwei. So I've placed all these gods based on the crit meta, right? And I've told you they're probably B tier. However, Jingwei, in reality right now, with crit, is S tier. You should be, if your hunter's not playing her, you should play her every game. She's the best god in the game. She's critting for around 2,000 to 2,500 right now with full build, a 3K pot, and Fire Giant. So without those, you're hitting for like 1,500. The new crit item is OP. Crit is just scaling way too high right now. She would be S tier. I would play her over every mage right now if you're just trying to win. Once those nerfs go through on these items, they're going to go through. She falls back to C tier. Where I'd still rather have her, than an Anubis or an Izanami. But should you be playing her? Probably not. Kukulkan, B tier. Kukulkan's a weird god. All right. All mages scaling are not high enough. They're not scaling high enough because intel is so low. Example, Brawler's Beatstick, strength item has 60 strength. Divine Ruin, intel item has 60 intel. That doesn't make any sense. They should have the same numbers. They got to really buff intel items like crazy to make mages good. Regardless, Kukulkan still works because his clear is good. If you know how to use his dash, you can, whenever you're standing in your 3 and you pop your 2, it will dash. If you know how to do that, you shouldn't be getting ganked. He's a very hard god to kill for most gods outside of maybe Fenrir, right? So you're playing him, you might want to ban Fenrir, just an idea. The big thing with Kukulkan is mid to late game, you play around polyprocs. As I mentioned, you have to stand in your 3 to dash out. Your 3 is not a main form of damage. Your 2 shouldn't be spammed. You need to make sure you have that to either chase or to run away. Your 1 is your main source of damage late game. You 1 and you land a poly. Your 1 is very easy to land in Smite 1 compared to, Smite 2 compared to Smite 1. Poly procs off of the 1 because they're so slow are also very easy to land. Anytime I play against good Kukulkan and I die, literally 1500 plus damage is from poly procs. Because you're just autoing. It sounds boring, but it is what it is. You also have your ultimate. It's not hitting as hard as Smite 1, still does good damage. So that's your second form of damage in a team fight. Then your 3. You really only use your 3 when you know you're safe or it's guaranteed damage you need to output. Otherwise, you're saving it for self-peel and to get away, to dash. If you're doing that and you process after the late game team fights, you will be a very, very strong player on Kukulkan. If you're playing like you were in Smite 1 where you're just spamming the 1 and the 3 on cooldown, you're probably going to die a lot. Medusa would be a higher placed hunter regardless because she does so well in mid lane with clear. She almost plays like a mage that does physical damage, but you don't build her ability. You still build her auto attack regardless of the meta. You're still building her auto attack damage. With the crit meta, she would be another mid I'd put up at S tier. Just unstoppable right now with crit meta. Neith, another hunter that's very good in mid. I think strength aspect Neith is the best Neith by far. So if you don't know how aspect works on Neith, whenever you blow up your weave, it gives you a passive stack of attack speed. It takes away the AoE damage from it, but it gives you a stack of attack speed that's stacked 6 times. At 6 stacks, you're getting crazy attack speed because your attack speed scales off strength. So you're building ability. Really, if you're playing as a mid laner outside of current meta, you'll probably go an ability version of Neith with like a Kins. In the current meta, I just go the regular hunter build, the crit hunter build. So it's Dagger of Frenzy, it's crit item, Xe, it's Pen, Titan's Wind, it's more crit, Hydras. That's what I've been running. It stomps. I think it's one of the biggest sleeper mid gods right now. Your lane clear is ridiculous. Your jungle clear is insane. You basically run up in one shot, like a buff, like a red buff or a yellow buff. It's actually nuts for invading when cheap pressure or just clearing your own camps. I think Neith is a sleeper pick. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I'll put her in B for now. With crit meta, I'd put her in A or S very easily right now, so look to play her. Nuwa. I think Nuwa is very overrated. I think the only thing Nuwa is good for is if basically following up off your team getting massive pressure. You don't create pressure. You don't really do much on Nuwa. Your ult doesn't even hit hard in Smite 2 at all. I will say the one thing she's good at is if you aren't a comfortable player in the mid lane, you get placed in mid, you play her because you just throw out your 1 over and over again, it'll clear the wave. You sit under your tower. You literally play to not die, to ult, and then you wait for grouping for late game team fights. She's one of the only gods in the game that can do that right now. So that's why she's valuable. I think she's very overrated by higher level players when they try to force her over and over and over again. Poseidon, I think he needs more buffs. They just reverted a lot of his nerfs. I don't think it's enough. I think he's fine to play. I think he's really risky without mobility or CC immunity. So against a lot of these matchups, he's just going to die over and over again. You have to position like a madman, like a beast to get away with him because of the way it works. He does have the movement from his 2, which is nice, but he's also only got his Kraken, which is going to be avoided 90% of the time, and his damage output is nowhere near some of these other gods. However, it's not a bad thing. It's just a really hard to play thing. Raw mid, I think I'd run raw mid, no aspect now after the changes. I'd go full damage and I'd play just like raw in Smite 1. Probably put him in B tier though. His mid laning phase is solid. You're still kind of unsafe, but you have a CC immunity, which is big. You hit pretty hard. Like you're not hitting Smite 1 hard. You're not one-shotting with your ult, but you're getting up there with damage with a full damage raw mid, no aspect. Soul. I wouldn't play Soul outside of the current meta. So right now, C tier. With crit build, though, you're up in A or S tier. Another hunter, just play it, right? Just play it. The Morrigan, very difficult god to play. Lots of weird interactions with the ultimate. If you're consistent with her, you put in the time, she's great. She's pretty much unkillable with the aspect. If you run no aspect, that's also viable because you can go for the one shot into the swap into a tank. Difficult god to play. Not an insane team fight unless you're swapping correctly. And I really feel like the level she needs to play her correctly is just much higher than most people play at. Like, even in Masters, there's a lot of people that can't play Morgan correctly. Vulcan, I think Vulcan is probably the second best mage right now. I'd say Hecate, Vulcan, Agni in that order. I have 3 builds on Smite Source. I have a damage build, which is ridiculously good. Late game, without a 3k pot, your 3 is hitting for like 800, your 1's hitting for like 700, your ultimate can hit for like 15, 1600 without Fire Giant or 3k pot. Your turrets in Smite 2 feel like trash. You use the Thumper and the 2 for a lot of lane clear and like farming while you rotate and stuff. But in team fights, they don't do a lot. They do not get ability or item procs like they started to do in Smite 1. So like Soul Reaver won't proc. Soul Gem won't proc. Gem of ISO won't proc. Like things will not proc on turrets anymore. So they're really, to me, only early game things that maybe for like killing an objective, right? They help kill an objective, which is dope. So the mods are listed on all of the builds. I really prioritize and mainly play around the actual Vulcan kit rather than the turrets doing the damage for you. They are good and annoying. They're just not great. They're not the key parts of your kit anymore. There's a hybrid build up on Smite Source as well, because you can play around one of his mods. They're the new, the +1s for Vulcan. That makes him tankier when he's near his Thumper. So you can actually run around with like 200 prots on Vulcan very easily. And you're not the tankiest god in the game, but a jungler going on you that doesn't have full pen is not going to kill you. You're going to outtrade them heavily. It's a really fun build. It's a little more expensive. You need to make sure you're prioritizing farming in the mid to late game, because those are your 2 of your last items that you're grabbing. It's a fun build. And then I also have a support build over for Vulcan, but we're talking about mid, so it doesn't matter. And then Zeus. Zeus would be another one I put in A tier. His only downside is how easy he is to kill. His damage output, he can outtrade people. Like he's gonna 1v1 all day. But once you start talking about supports, Sobek's coming in and plucking you, Kepri's plucking you, Geb's blink ulting you, it's really hard to play Vulcan against that. You can, because his damage output is good. You have to very much focus on positioning. Positioning is huge. But this is how my tier list is. I know Hecate got some nerfs. Like I said, I don't think they're that big. If they end up being that big, then I probably wouldn't put anyone in S tier. I'd probably move her down to A. There would be no S tier mid laners, which is really unfortunate, but it's due to the low amount of intellect on items and or the low scaling. Like some scaling isn't even low, but with the intellect being so low, they either up the scaling or they up the intellect on items. The problem with upping the intellect on items, you start to worry about hybrid builds and solo laners building it and being too strong. So I think is one reason they were nerfed in the first place. But yeah, here is our mid lane tier list. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If you're wondering like, where are the assassins? Where are the warriors? You shouldn't be playing them in mid. You can force anything in Smite 2 in any role and like possibly get a win. But that does not mean if you're trying to win every game, you should go them. These are the gods that are good. You should play in the mid lane. You should make them part of your rotations. And as the game changes, I will update this, and that you'll have to pick up new gods. Essentially, Smite Source does have a build for every single god, at least one, multiple. Usually, there's multiple builds for gods. If I was reading something weird, if something doesn't make sense to you, comments below. Builds smitesource.com. I will do a top 5 video on the top 5 mid gods that you should be playing right now and break them down, how you play them, how you position, how you build them. But that information is out there already. It'll just be a concentrated video. Be looking for that. Hopefully you guys like the video. Hopefully this is still valuable for you guys. It's not a hard thing for me to do. I do like doing this, but if you don't need it, tell me. Put it in the comments, please. And I will see you on the video later tomorrow, the next day, and the next day.